Okay, Karen, are we rolling?
Rolling one.
Okay. Contact. Good
Rolling
morning,
two.
everyone. It's my opportunity to welcome you and to introduce BrianCoffey. This is all the stuff everyone knows already, candidate for our Extension Farm Management position. Brian's a master's graduate of our program from 2001, then went to K-State from there. 2005, joined Global Scholars, and then has been working in the STAN since then. Started out in Tajikistan and then is now in Kyrgyzstan. If I get the stands right. So, Brian, very looking forward to hearing your remarks, and thank you for joining us.
Well, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Had a good morning visiting with folks, and look forward to talking with some of the rest of you over today and tomorrow. So over the next few minutes, what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of information about me personally. Some of that Lee already talked about, my personal background. Talk about some things that I've done professionally that I think will work really well in transitioning into a farm management extension job. And then give you a little bit of insight into my teaching experience and what I hope to do in the future, and end up with just some general components that I would use to define my extension program in farm management. So starting on the personal side, I did grow up in south central Kentucky, right around Lake Cumberland, and like everybody else there, small farm. At that time we had tobacco, and we also had beef cattle, mainly cow-calf. So grew up on a small farm. Came here at the University of Kentucky, finished my undergraduate in '99, and master's degree in 2001. Worked with Dr. Dillon as my major professor, also Dr. Skees, and John Anderson at that time was an extension professor. He was also on my committee. So I had a good time here. Only good things to say about that experience. Got me ready to move on to Manhattan, Kansas, the Little Apple, and did my PhD work there, working with Ted Schroeder, mostly livestock issues, livestock risk management, also consumer meat demand, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Then after that, my wife and I decided that we'd look for opportunities to work and live abroad. So we did join an organization called Global Scholars, and they take American professors and they pair them up with universities around the world, mostly in low-income developing countries. So the goal being to enhance the educational sector, and also we know that the world's leaders go through the universities. All right, and so trying to mentor and train tomorrow's leaders. We started that in Dushanbe, Tajikistan. So the southernmost of the former Soviet republics. Tajikistan, a developing nation. I worked in the Technological University of Tajikistan for a little bit more than 7 years. A year and a half ago, we moved one country to the north, to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. And so I'm working there in the Kane Institute of Business and Sciences. So I went there. This is a brand new institute. I went there with the task of helping develop a business curriculum and also doing a large share of the core teaching in business and some of the econ theory that the students need. So that's a little bit about my background. Right now, I'm very much interested in getting back into the ag econ world, something a little bit closer to my training. Have very much enjoyed and continue to enjoy the teaching overseas, but I think it's time to be back closer to, like I say, my ag econ training. So some of the things that I've done that really enjoyed and I think translate well into preparing me for this kind of position. One was my dissertation work on micro-level meat demand. So meat demand continues to be a very popular topic in ag economics. High-income country like the United States, a big portion of food expenditures go toward meat. Meat production on the production ag side is also very important. A lot of people are dependent on that. So for a variety of reasons, we have looked at meat demand from all different perspectives across the years. Now, what we've generally done is we've looked at what we call aggregate demand. And what that means is we've aggregated across time. We're usually looking at quarterly data. We've aggregated across consumers. We've aggregated across products. We're looking at demand for species at the species level, pork, beef, and poultry. All right? And so that has, over the years, given us a really rich, good understanding of how the demand for those species evolves over time. However, that sort of data, that sort of analysis necessarily obscures some things that we would like to be able to learn. So for example, when we aggregate across consumers, we make the implicit assumption that households are basically the same. We make the implicit assumption that every household has the same average income. Now we know that's not true, and as economists, we think that income will affect, the level of income will affect meat purchase decisions. All right, so that's one example. Another example is within species, we know that consumers probably substitute, for example, between pork chops and pork roasts or something like that. We can't get at those questions with aggregate level demand analysis. So this isn't to say that aggregate demand analysis is bad or that we're finished with it. It just means that we need analysis at the household level to complement that sort of demand analysis. And so this is with this project, that's what we set out to do. So specifically, we estimated a demand system looking at 12 very narrowly defined meat products. All right, and we were using consumer purchase diary data that was collected to basically mirror U.S. Census data. So it was consumer diary data, but it allowed us to generalize to basically the whole country. Now this was the first effort, to the best of my knowledge, to model disaggregated meat demand in the United States as a demand system. There are several other studies out there that use single equations, two-step models, some other very useful tools, but nobody modeled it as a demand system before this, to the best of my knowledge. Since we had consumer purchase diary data, we had information on fish purchases. The previous aggregate level demand analysis, like I said, was basically limited to beef, pork, and poultry. So we were fortunate enough to be able to include some information about fish. One innovation in demand analysis over the last, say, 25 years has been the use of media information indices as a way to proxy consumer exposure to information. So the idea here is we go out and we use some search engine like LexisNexis, and for a given time period and a given event or a given topic, we count the number of newspaper articles that are out there at that time for a given event. And what that gives us is a proxy for how much consumers are exposed to that information. The more articles, the more exposure. If there's more articles, then we assume that that information is also showing up on radio, on television, magazine articles, and that kind of thing. Now, this has been used most notably in meat demand by Piggott and Marsh at the aggregate level, but integrating it into a micro-level demand system was somewhat novel at the time. And again, this gives us a good feel for how these indices work with a different kind of data. So we were able to do that also. And on the empirical side, we introduced the expectation maximization algorithm as an estimator. Now the EM algorithm has been around since about 1977. That was a seminal piece that put it out there. It's formulated specifically for censored data problems. All right, and so micro-level meat demand with consumer purchase diaries, we definitely have a censored demand problem. So all that means is that when we're modeling for 12 different products, so a given month, a consumer will not buy all 12 products. So any product that they don't buy, that means we have a zero expenditure share. All right, and so in that way our data are censored. The expectation maximization algorithm specifically addresses that empirical issue. It's very computationally efficient. It's been used a lot in the biostatistics literature. for whatever reason, has not been applied to demand problems or micro-level demand problems prior to this. So that was another empirical contribution. A few of the things that we found that turned out to be quite interesting, I think, is we did see quite a bit of variability in both own price elasticities and expenditure elasticities. So just to take as an example, in the beef group, all right, so ground beef turned out to be own price elastic. Our estimate was something around 1.08. Beef steak own price inelastic. Our estimate was something around 0.77. So again, two products within the same species, different responsiveness to price that we could not have understood at the aggregate level. The situation for those two products relative to expenditures was actually the opposite. The higher price per pound beef steak was expenditure elastic. So as if expenditures on beef go up by 1%, the amount of beef steak purchased goes up by more than 1%. Ground beef, expenditure inelastic. So again, this is some richness, some different details we couldn't understand at the aggregate level. We did see substitution within species, within, for example, in our beef categories, beef roast, in our category that we call other beef, function as economic substitutes. Substitution across different species was linked, I think, to method of preparation. So a couple of notable examples, beef roast and pork roast function as economic substitutes. Beef roast and pork chops, or ground beef and pork chops, did not. And so beef roast and pork roast, you cook those in about the same way, cooking in the oven, long periods of time. So the function of those products are the same, and we would expect them to be substitutes. And so we were able to empirically verify that. Beef roast and whole poultry also showed up as economic substitutes. So just some examples there of things that we found and empirically verified that we could not do with aggregate demand analysis. Now, that sort of research, I think, gives a good picture of what I hope to do in the future, because it was empirically, quantitatively rigorous. We're able to publish it in the journal Applied Economics, so we're happy with that. Made a contribution to the academic literature, but then at the same time, those findings, those different elasticities and different ways that the demand shifters acted were of immediate relevance to people who market and sell meat products, people who produce meat products. So finding that combination of contributing to the literature, but having applied results that right away we can take out and communicate with people. All right, so I think that would be my goal in the future for applied research. Another project that I had the opportunity to work on that would be more, I think, in the extension world was quantifying the impact of the first BSE case in the United States. Now, BSE is the acronym for bovine spongiform encephalopathy. And in 2003, we had the first confirmed case of BSE show up on U.S. soil. So at the time, Adrian Polanski was Secretary of Agriculture in Kansas, and he wanted a study to quantify what the impacts of that case were. Now, obviously to Kansas, beef's very important. K-State has a strong ag-econ department, so he came to us. Jim Minard, who at the time was an extension economist there, was the leader of this research team. All right, and so again, we had a few months to quantify this impact. I was a part of the team, and some of my roles included coordinating logistics. So to get out there and understand how this affected everybody, we had to talk to people in industry, we had to talk to animal scientists, meat scientists, we had to talk to a wide range of people, and so it fell to me to kind of coordinate that, get the appropriate members of our team together with appropriate people in other disciplines and out in industry. The other thing is Ted Schroeder and I took one piece of the study and we quantified the impacts to the beef packing sector. And so again, this meant going out there, getting in the car, getting on planes, sitting across the table with beef packers and understanding how this affected them. It also meant that I developed a survey instrument that we used with the beef packers to elicit the impacts of the BSE study. When it came time to put together the study, I did write the introduction, concluding sections, and I wrote kind of the connecting sections between different parts. Like different team members did different sections. It was up to me to put those together. I oversaw the editing with the final product, put it out to the team members. We also sent it out for expert review. And so because of that kind of role, I was listed as the lead author on the study. Now, what did we get out there? We got out 2 cooperative extension publications. One was a quite lengthy publication, has a nice history and timeline of BSE in there, and then it's got our findings and then some concluding remarks. Also, in addition to that, basically an executive summary. And these 2 extension publications generated quite a bit of attention back then when they were out, and I'm kind of still pleased that even now, as people write about food safety impacts on meat or BSE impacts on meat, that this study is still out there, it's still being referenced. Another thing was Sean Fox, one of the team members, took the lead on summarizing and detailing some of our findings as a choices article. And so here, I think what I demonstrated was some things that are very important in an extension program. The ability to work in a team, the ability to meet a deadline. We basically had 1 semester to do this. Also working with interdisciplinary focus. So we were with the animal science department, we were working with people out in the industry, and being able to coordinate that and communicate with all different kinds of people on a team. And I think all of those things are really important in extension work, and I think for this project gave me an opportunity to do some of those. Business consulting. While I was in Central Asia, I did do some consulting through the USAID Farmer to Farmer program. So Farmer to Farmer program basically takes American experts, pairs them with agribusinesses or farms in developing countries. So the farm or the agribusiness basically gets free business consulting. The American expert gets the cultural exchange, and hopefully both benefit. So in my case, since I was living in Tajikistan, it was easy. I was able to do multiple assignments. I worked with 2 very small-scale dairy processors and 1 soft drink manufacturer. So in all cases, what I did was go in and do some basic probability analysis to say, okay, which of your products is contributing to paying down fixed costs and eventually, hopefully, contributing to some profit. And then giving marketing advice with how can you push the profitable products, maybe move away from the non-profitable products. And what I found was this was really needed advice. These people were very serious about producing quality products. They're very serious that their products were a benefit to the community, but they just hadn't sat down and thought through the business plan or thought through, basic economic questions. So being able to come in and fill in those gaps and help them with those things was helpful. As far as deliverables, I did give them some spreadsheet tools. This was challenging as these people were not real familiar with computers, or maybe familiar at all, but developing Excel spreadsheets that were user-friendly, that could answer questions like which products are profitable, how much do we have to produce every month to break even, and some of those basic questions. I was able to follow up with the soft drink manufacturer a few months after my visit, and they were still using these tools. They were actually at that time looking at exporting a product to Moscow. And so they were using the same tools that I gave them to input new cost and a new scenario to evaluate the profitability of that. And so that was good to see that that the ongoing use of that. I think this work, more than anything I've said so far, directly translates to extension and things that I would like to accomplish as helping farm managers and agribusiness owners in the state of Kentucky, kind of coming in with the people who have a good idea, who have the technical production knowledge and that passion for doing something useful, and giving them some objective economic information, help with decision making, and getting decision tools out there. Teaching has been the focus of my career so far. Both universities that I've worked at, no extension or research activity in those universities. So basically you could think of it as 100% teaching. I've done a lot that's been close to my training. So micro, macro theory, of course very close to training. I've taught management, which I enjoy teaching a lot, and taught marketing. Because I was in a little bit different situation, I had to be flexible, had to branch out a little bit. I saw that in those former Soviet republics, students both before and during university do not have an opportunity to develop their oral communication, public speaking skills. There's no sort of equivalent to 4-H or FFA. So during the Soviet Union, there were those things. And so this is a big gap now. This is a vacuum that needs to be filled. So in Tajikistan, I looked for ways to do that outside the university. And at my current appointment, I actually teach a formal class on public speaking. So giving students those skills to improve communication, build their confidence, and practice communicating things that are important to other people. And since in Tajikistan, I was thoroughly American. I taught American studies for a couple of semesters. And that was obviously outside my training, but I think it was beneficial to students and it was enjoyable. So that flexibility in teaching and ability to teach a wide range of things, I think has prepared me well, and look forward to teaching in the future. And so last, to wrap up, just some things that I would work to sort of include or use to define an extension program. So the first thing would be to make everything that I do market-based. I don't think it's enough just to give producers price information or give producers information in pieces, but teach them to think through problems in economic terms, in terms of supply and demand, and also teaching people to think about the needs, the wants of the consumer or of their customer. Now for some people, this is easier. If you're selling your produce at a farmer's market, then you're very much connected with your final consumer. If you're a cow-calf producer, you're selling your weaned calves, the final producer is way downstream, and there's some disconnect. But either way, I think it's important to teach people to think in these terms. What is it that consumers want that they can't get? Or what problem do consumers have right now that we can help them solve? And so always looking for those opportunities of what demand is going to pull through that market channel. Not, staying away from some of the developing the product and then, trying to force it down the supply chain, but looking for those opportunities to fill that demand. Another thing would be to always focus on the whole farm or the whole business. Looking at one enterprise separately is not very effective. I think if you change one part of your farm or one part of your firm, you necessarily change the whole thing. So teaching people to think in terms of trade-offs and opportunity costs for the way that different opportunities or different decisions will affect the profitability of their entire business. All right? The other thing would be to identify sources of risk. If you go into a new enterprise or you expand your operation, then you expose yourself to new sources of risk. Now, this isn't necessarily a horrible thing, because you also expose yourself to upside risk, to more potential profit. But we have to think preemptively about what new sources of risk we're exposing producers to as they get into new enterprises or bigger operations and those kind of things, and thinking early on about steps we can take to manage those. The other thing that I plan to do, to the extent that's possible, is use interactive training methods. Now, this doesn't always work. There's sometimes that producer groups or different groups want an extension specialist to simply come, give them a market update, or give them an update on what's going on. And those things are fine. But in the case that we're trying to teach people how to use a new spreadsheet tool, or we're trying to teach people how to work through a specific problem, is to set that up as a real-world case so that the farmers or the agents, whoever we're working with to train, are involved in the training, that they're making their own assumptions, they're making their own inputs, and they're walking through a problem the way that they will have to when they apply these things in the real world. So to the extent that it's appropriate and to the extent that it's possible, making trainings very interactive. So the other thing would be when face-to-face communication isn't possible, to be available for interactive webinars or else putting videos up online that people can watch. I think sometimes policy events happen, different events happen out in the economy, and if we wait to schedule a meeting, maybe it's 2-3 weeks down the road. And so I think when things like this happen, when timeliness is a concern, to get out there with either an interactive web-based seminar or to get videos out there that people can watch, and then follow up on those with face-to-face meetings, but meeting the timeliness of the needs of producers and agribusiness owners. So that gives you some idea, hopefully, of my background, some things that I've worked on in research and consulting, teaching, that I think have prepared me well for this position, and some of my ideas about components of a successful extension program. So if there's anything there that was not clear, or maybe something I didn't mention that you would like to talk about, I'd be happy to try to answer questions.
So on your last slide, I was noticing how a lot of these techniques would be really fantastic for one-on-one or kind of consulting for a business or a cooperative. But this job will demand meeting the needs of a large number of stakeholders. So to me, these seem very, organization specific. How could you make these sorts of concepts available to a much larger stakeholder base?
Well, I guess maybe if we just pick one, I guess the interactive training, maybe that one sounds pretty specific. So for example, if we take the business consulting experience, so the spreadsheet tools that I developed there were customized for the businesses. But the general framework of those would work for any multi-product firm or even multi-product farm. And so I think at the general level, we can back that up with making the spreadsheet tool sort of really flexible, so that producers go in or the people who use it go in and they input their own data. So I think from that way, it could serve basically, with this specific example, anybody who's producing multiple ag products. But then at the specific level, if we get a request to go out to a county or a region where there's a group of, maybe a group of producers that want to learn more about the tool, then setting up that case situation, letting them actually walk through it. But the tool itself would be more general.
Brian talked a lot about just some general topics there, but coming into this position, how would you assess the demand for certain programming? How would you go about assessing that, given that we do have a lot of farm management, business management resources in the department, including KFPM and some other state specialists?
Assessing the needs.
In terms of game plan.
Yeah, so I guess my sort of strategy for assessing needs, I would start with talking with people in the department and see, you know, the extension faculty who are out there to see what needs they think are, you know, that they've run into. And so then, you know, comparing that with my skill set and look for an overlap. Then move on from there to the extension faculty in the wider College of Ag with kind of the same question. So my background and focus has mostly been in livestock and beef production. So I would ask people who are involved in that area. And again, you know, look for that overlap. So finding something that the Ag Econ folks and people around the College of Ag are saying there's a need for, and then following up on that. Maybe a next step would be communicating with agents, county agents. And so finding that where the need kind of overlaps with my skill set, and then looking to go into that.
Does that overlap include crops?
I think so. Could. Yeah.
So kind of related to that, the bulk of the programming for whoever would be in your position would be in livestock and grain. So maybe pick one or two issues in both of those that you think are probably most pressing for, you know, the livestock farmers and the grain farmers, and maybe how you'd address those very quickly.
One or two issues for both livestock and grain. I think livestock issues, I think right now, one of the things that's out there is this idea of animal welfare and management practices. Consumers seem to be concerned about that, and I think eventually it's going to be important, even down to the cow-calf level. So maybe getting out and understanding the way farmers could preemptively answer some of those challenges on the livestock side. On the grain side, you know, I guess I don't have as specific of an idea there. I mean, certainly lower prices these days and challenging environment. So I think more and more on the grain side, I think a lot of times the production capacity, the production ability is pretty consistent across farms. You know, that people can produce the same amount. So I think showing people that by being better at their financial analysis, you know, looking at the financial ratios of their operation, judging the financial health of their operation, and some of those things are where they can actually find some of their big benefits. You know, that on the technical side of things, it's a lot harder to compete with your neighbor, but I think with you know, on the financial management side, there's some more room to compete there. Kenny?
You mentioned your BSE work, I guess, from your Kansas State. I was kind of trying to link that with some of your interest here. Are there things that you learned from that BSE study that you think have implications for risk management for producers today? Not just BSE so much, but just events like that that are virtually impossible to predict and report.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I think, you know, kind of at the most basic level, just understanding that there are those events out there, that whoever you're talking with, we can't predict when they're going to happen. So it means, you know, it's all the more important that your operation is, you know, financially sound and those kind of things. Yeah, other than that, it would be hard. But yeah, you're right. There are a lot of things that you know, can be catastrophic, hard to predict when they come along.
Brian, along those same lines, are there other things out of your research that would lead into extension programs?
I think, you know, another thing that I was involved with, the state of Kansas has a Kansas Farm Management Program, and so participating farms, some of those farms are in there for multiple years, a long time, and they collect annual data. So Alan Featherstone and I looked at sort of measuring some efficiency measures using those data. And so again, it was kind of it was empirically challenging research. We were using math programming techniques, but the findings, what farms were efficient and those kind of things were immediately relevant. So some of those kind of things, applying that to Kentucky data, I think could be enlightening and show us some real things, show us some new things, what's going on.
Well, that would show you research results. How would you then carry that further into an extension program?
Yeah, so if we're finding, from based on Kentucky data that certain characteristics are leading to efficiency or certain characteristics are leading to profitability, then I think showing that research-based findings to producers that, this is what we've seen, this is what's translating into results, and then I guess customizing the teaching and training so that people get better at those certain things. Yes.
Following up on these questions, in that particular work in Kansas with Alan Featherstone,
Mhm.
so what were the policy implications?
The policy,
Could you say, aha, here's something that people could actually change, increase in efficiency?
we did not get that far, honestly.
Obviously, in today's beef price environment, these beef cattle farmers aren't complaining too much about much of anything. Whenever prices begin to fall, they point a lot about packer concentration. How would you respond to beef cattle farmers that are upset about high concentration in the livestock industries?
Yeah,
What does the research tell us?
yeah, it's mixed. I think, on the one hand, it seems like something right now you kind of have to live with, that packing sector is concentrated. But I think, there are opportunities. There are people out there now that want locally sourced beef, or they want smaller scale packers that maybe treat the animals differently. I mentioned animal welfare. So I think there are opportunities to do things differently. But again, it's always going to be demand driven, if there's a consumer demand for those. So I think, producers that are interested, there's definitely some opportunity out there. I don't know exactly how far down the road that is. And packer concentration, there's different findings in the research. Certainly gives us, gives consumers cheaper meat. They do see the economies of scale, but then, you don't have a lot of choices when you get to that finished stage. You don't have a lot of choices for who's going to buy the live cattle.
This question came out from a conversation with a few other colleagues. If you follow, I'm not sure if you follow up this issue, so the pork price and the chicken price, they have been pretty flat, but the beef price, I think, is going up recently, right? So do you have, I'm not sure if you follow up this, do you have an explanation for this?
I think the conventional wisdom now is we've got tight cattle supplies, and beef consumption has more than kept up with that beef price. So Glenn Tonzer at K-State, he publishes a beef demand index. And so what he's saying is that quarter after quarter, we're still seeing, strong demand for beef. And so I think it's just that tight supplies and strong demand.
Right. So, I don't know whether this is outside what you would consider to be management into marketing. And it goes back to Will's question about packer concentration. The obvious logic is when you've got a bunch of aggregated people, you try and find some way to aggregate yourself to get some marketing power. So, would marketing co-ops fit within your framework for farm management? Because if you build one of those, it clearly has management implications.
Yeah, well, yeah, certainly wouldn't claim to be an expert on cooperatives, but I think helping producers, sort of analyze and consider those opportunities would be something I would do as a farm management specialist. And it might involve connecting them with other people and being part of a team. But I think helping people think of those things and then analyze some of the implications would definitely fall under management.
Brian, as you probably know, cow-calf profitability is at record highs right now. Maybe not just now, but all-time record highs for the next 50 years or so. Unfortunately, we as economists know that profitability will most likely come down. Question is just when, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever. But let's say that you had a meeting, county agent invited you out to essentially help his cattle farmers prepare for that inevitable drop in profitability. What would be some of the key points that you would try to discuss in terms of helping them prepare for the future? In terms of, right now things are great. Farmers, the cattle farmers probably aren't too worried about many things, but what would be some ideas you could give them to structure their operations to make sure that they're in a potentially profitable situation 5 years or 10 years from now when those prices drop?
Yeah, so I think, in this time, like you said, record profitability, sort of good years, would be a good time to focus on improving herd quality. So looking at, I know replacement heifers and that kind of thing are also at a really high price, but right now would be a time to focus on improving herd quality. I think also other aspects of the operation that could be improved, whether it's health management, because like right now, your cows, because those prices are so high, and your breeding cows, they're worth more, all right? And so what you can do is by better health management, if you could keep that cow in good breeding health for another 1 or 2 years of her life, by better health management, then you can take at the margin, get some of these bigger rewards. So I think looking for, health management, better herd management, maybe even better ways to cover the cattle to get higher rates of fertilization. So some of those management decisions to do the best job you can with the resources you have right now to get the benefits.
Any other questions? Brian, thank you very much. I'm
Okay.
sure you'll get some follow-up